The dust has now settled on the 2025 recruiting cycle, but Auburn hanging in there with a top 10 class from 2025. And if you have been loosely keeping up with recruiting, that's not a massive surprise because Auburn had some streaks throughout this cycle in and of itself, and they landed some top players, most notably a 5-star quarterback in Deuce Knight. So that's huge. But typically, when you have a season that lacks on-field results, you don't usually end up with the top 10 recruiting class. And Auburn's sitting there with the number 8 class in America, now with the bow on the 2025 cycle. So how did this happen? What does this mean? What can we glean from this from a college football perspective? We'll talk about all that right now. If you are an Auburn Tiger fan, dial in right here, baby. Dial in right here. We got a lot to talk about when it comes to Hugh Freeze, when it comes to your football program, when it comes to recruiting, all that. So make sure you're dialed in. If you're not an Auburn fan, you're just a college football junkie, welcome home. Glad to have you here. Go ahead and subscribe for us. Appreciate you in advance for that. So as I mentioned, Auburn not just didn't make a bowl game, but took a step back from Hugh Freeze's first season if you look at what the on-field results were. First year, they make a bowl game. This past season, they win 5 games. But still, as I mentioned at the top of this thing, sitting there with a number 8 class in America, got a 5-star quarterback signed to you now. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Everybody from the back of the room is going to yell, they just bought their class. Money talks, and money is the reason why they got Deuce Knight. Money is the reason why they have a top 10 class in general. And I say this with a lot of different classes, so we'll say this with Auburn because I just think it's probably best to cover all our bases here whenever we put out a video like this. If Auburn was using NIL to land a top 10 class, good for them. Money well spent. That's the day and age we're in now in college football. If you are not willing to match what Auburn is throwing out there when it comes to NIL, I probably wouldn't yell about being broke or not willing to spend money. Just my take on this thing. But when we look at the top 10 class outside of the financial piece that probably plays a factor, I think it's really interesting that even when Auburn wasn't having success on the field, this class stayed together. Because typically what you see is, okay, a class maybe comes together hot and heavy in the summer, and they're buying into the trajectory and the potential results, and then as the season doesn't go a certain way, then you see that class sort of like an ice cube slowly start to melt, then it's a puddle on signing day. That wasn't Auburn. Like Deuce Knight committed when they weren't all that successful. He went to many games that were tough looks and tough losses for the Tigers. Like he saw it firsthand and still ended up committing to Auburn, flipping from Notre Dame, a team that, oh, by the way, made the college football playoff and played for a national title. Food for thought. So why is this happening? I can't help but feel like there is still a ton of belief in the vision that Hugh Freeze has and is pitching to this recruiting class and pitching to what Auburn is going to be in the future. I think this class thinks that, one, a lot of them can come in and play right away, and two, I think they believe they're the group that's going to turn this thing around. And I think that's what Hugh Freeze has almost between the lines and point blank in some sense told us as the college football public. He keeps going back to, hey, when I got here, the roster was not at a place that we needed it to be at. And so since I've been here, that has been priority number one. Let's get our guys in here. Let's up the talent level. And then once we have the proper talent, then we can start to really compete for what we all want to compete for, which is, of course, SEC titles and the college football playoff. You look at what they've done on the transfer portal side, and that checks out, man. Like as of right now, us taping this, have a top 10 class in the portal. Went out and land one of the top receivers, Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. Go out and get a Jackson Arnold, a former 5-star plus kind of quarterback from Oklahoma. Like they've gone to work in the portal, man. And this isn't new. Last year, had a top 20 portal class. Okay, so they're doing work in terms of trying to get guys that have proven production and experience and things of that nature to help them play right away. And I think a lot of the people that are selling their stock on Auburn, I don't think that there's, again, you take a step back in the second year and you're looking at what Auburn's going to be going forward and you're like, hey, JD, it's year 3. I was here for year 1. Year 2, I had some expectations because you pointing to me in the camera, told me that there was reason for optimism, and I think there was. So year 3, man, I'm not getting hurt again. Protecting myself, protecting my expectations. I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm not holding out hope here for Auburn anytime soon. And that's warranted. But my only pushback there would be when we talk about Hugh Freeze and what he operates like offensively, we've said many times, it's a quarterback-driven operation. Yes, you want to run the football. Yes, you got to have great skill players. I think Auburn now going into next year should have some pretty good skill players, and a Cam Coleman getting better, and that whole freshman receiver class becoming sophomores, and Eric Singleton. Beside the point, it's quarterback driven, and you have a guy in Peyton Thorne who, whether it's on him, whether it's on the offensive staff for maybe not making it as digestible for him, I don't know what it is, but I look at the quarterback and his stats, and he threw 19 picks in 2 years, 10 and 9 respectively between those 2 seasons, if you want to divvy it up. So it's very tough for me to say that it is a Hugh Freeze and Auburn problem, and I'm not so sure it's not a quarterback problem. Like, I think there's blame to go around, but the point I'm trying to make here is I wonder if getting the dude at quarterback for Auburn could make all the difference in the world. And again, they believe they have him in this 2025 class in 5-star quarterback Deuce Knight. Now, the caveat there is you got to get to the era where Deuce Knight is your starting quarterback. And my feel on this, Deuce Knight could win the job in the spring or in the fall or whenever, and more power to him. But my feel on this, by nature of you taking a Jackson Arnold out of the portal, is you likely need to have Jackson Arnold bridge the gap this year to get to Deuce Knight playing quarterback for you. I don't know if you really want to bank on a true freshman quarterback in the SEC, and Deuce Knight should be phenomenal. It's not me saying he can't be the guy for a year one, but again, you brought in Jackson Arnold, so I think you expect him to play. He has got to find a way to bridge the gap to next season. Got to. Now, what does bridge the gap look like? Is that 8 wins? Is that 9 wins? I think it's got to be in that territory. And when you look at last year for Auburn, it wasn't like they were just massively overwhelmed. You point to the Georgia game as the one that felt like it was the most out of hand, so to speak. But even in that game, there were spurts where Auburn was pretty frisky. But you look at the entirety of their schedule, and Auburn was in a lot of these games. In fact, a lot of these games you point to and say, gosh dang, man, Auburn shot themselves in the foot and hurt themselves. I mean, Auburn beat themselves in a lot of these spots. The Oklahoma game is the one you point to where if you win that football game, you don't throw a pick six to allow Oklahoma to find a way to get it done in the fourth quarter with their own Sooner magic, like you make a bowl game. If you don't throw a million interceptions against Cal as a team, you probably have a chance to get to 6 wins, right? It's not knocking Cal or Oklahoma. I'm just speaking of the facts here. Auburn has a lot of self-inflicted wounds that kept them from accomplishing a better record. So I'm not here to piece it back together in reverse and tell you that Auburn should have had a better record. They didn't. They didn't execute. They didn't get it done, and it's on them now to find a way to improve in 2025 and beyond. But when you look at this recruiting class, if you can get to a spot, like I just mentioned, where you are bridging the gap to where this class can make even more of an impact than I think some of these guys will make as true freshmen, we'll see. We'll see, but I think the fact that they kept a top 10 class together, even with the season they had, speaks to belief, speaks to resources, speaks to Hugh Freeze and his vision, and to this class as a whole buying into the vision itself. We've seen what Auburn can be when they're aligned. We're seeing it right now. If they have a top 10 class after a season where they miss a bowl game, I'd hate to see what they recruit like if they win 8 or 9 games. Food for thought. Appreciate y'all. Cato on the ones and twos. Make sure you are subscribed to college football year-round. Love y'all. Gonna keep this party rolling. We'll see y'all next time.